Hey everybody. We just ask everyone to kindly take their seats so we can get underway in the next couple of minutes. Again, we just ask everyone to please kindly take their seats so we can get the event underway in the next couple of minutes. Thank you. Everyone's important. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Faisal Kamisa, and it is an honor to be here today. On behalf of the Toronto Area Interfaith Council, the Aga Khan Museum, and presented in partnership with the Ismaili Council for Toronto, I'd like to welcome everyone to the Aga Khan Museum and the beautiful Nanji Family Foundation Auditorium for Pluralism in Practice, Interfaith Frameworks for Canada's Future. Thank you all for being here. Before anything, let's start with acknowledging the land we're on today. The Aga Khan Museum is built on land that is and has been under the stewardship of many Indigenous peoples over millennia, including the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat, and the Mississaugas of the Credit Nation. We are grateful for the opportunity to work and live on this land and be in this territory. We're also grateful for all of you to be here today. Thank you for braving this weather. This is Canada. At times the weather can be as diverse as the population. Just not this week at all. Just cold from Sunday to Sunday, but you're all here, and it makes everything feel just a little bit warmer. So thank you. Nobody would have blamed you if you stayed home, but the fact that you're here means a lot. So appreciate everyone being here this evening. It also means a lot to have a distinguished list of dignitaries joining us here today. We have the Honorable Michael H. Tulloch, Chief Justice of Ontario. We're also honored to have other members of the judiciary system here with us today. We thank you for being here. Mr. Vince Gasparo, Member of Parliament for Eglinton Lawrence and Parliamentary Secretary to the Secretary of State for Combating Crime. I need more titles in my name at some point, yeah. Councillor Shelley Carroll, City Councillor for Don Valley North, City of Toronto. And His Worship, Frank Scarpitti, Mayor of Markham. I know there was some traffic. I don't know if he's pulled in yet, but even if he's not, we can give him a little round of applause, and we'll give him another one when he gets here. Again, we thank you all for being here and look forward to hearing from some of you shortly. I say shortly because our panel discussion will follow the opening remarks from Chris Eaton and several others, who is the Chief Operating Officer at the Aga Khan Museum. And following the panel, there'll be a reception while you'll have an opportunity to check out the latest galleries in the museum. And I fully urge, if you haven't done it already, or even if you have, take advantage of this opportunity because everything in here truly is beautiful. That's what Chris told me to say, by the way. So, no, I'm kidding. With that, please join me in welcoming Chris Eaton, the COO of the Aga Khan Museum, to present the welcome remarks on behalf of the museum.
Yes, welcome to the museum once again, with a special welcome to the Chief Justice and to Meredith McGee, the Secretary General of the Global Center for Pluralism, who will be in dialogue with one another this evening with my colleague Sacha Preuve, the museum's Director of Curatorial and Public Programs, on the theme of Interfaith Frameworks for Canada's Future. As you know, we are gathered this evening in the Nanji Family Foundation Auditorium, and we have a couple of members of the Nanji family with us tonight. Welcome, Mimi and Azim. The Nanjis, through their transformational gift, yes, thank you, and support, have really greatly strengthened our performing arts program, allowing us to engage a wider set of audiences in our mission as a museum. We're very pleased to host this evening's event at the museum in partnership with the Toronto Area Interfaith Council and the Ismaili Council. This is an exceptionally appropriate venue for this discussion. We are a museum of historical works of art from across the Islamic world and of modern art from around the world. And as a museum, we believe that art is a powerful vehicle to promote thought and reflection, and to foster dialogue and understanding across cultures and faiths. All museums have to decide on what and how they are going to curate their exhibitions and public programs. They also have to decide on what messages and stories they want to tell, and what stories and messages they can authentically tell. At the Aga Khan Museum, we seek to demonstrate the historical and contemporary interconnectedness of the cultures and peoples who created and continue to create the arts in all of its forms that we celebrate here at the museum. And in doing so, we seek to build a sense of cultural understanding and belonging for all of our visitors, regardless of their backgrounds. We do this through the narratives that we present about our collection, through the temporary exhibitions that we curate, and through the performing arts and educational programs that we present and deliver. We also draw on the cultural and religious backgrounds of Canada's diverse communities, from our First Peoples to those Canadians whose citizenship ceremony was hosted here at the museum over the last year, for which I was very privileged to support one of those citizenship ceremonies. And my colleague Sacha actually became a Canadian citizen here at the museum over the course of this year. I think drawing on this diversity helps us to build a common understanding and a sense of belonging to this land and to our common society. So following this evening's dialogue, I would therefore invite and encourage you all to visit the museum's galleries, to see the selection in our permanent gallery and in the Belle Rive room on this floor, and the spectacularly beautiful temporary exhibition on contemporary Islamic art as the sun appears from beyond on the museum's upper floor. Again, welcome to the museum, and I hope you find this evening's program thought-provoking and enriching. Thank you.
Thank you. It's now my pleasure to call upon the stage Pastor Peter Noteboom, General Secretary, Canadian Council of Churches.
What an honor to be here to say a word to introduce Zul Kasamali, who will speak shortly. I wanted to start with a question. Who was it who tapped you on the shoulder or invited you and said, you know, you ought to consider being involved in interfaith work? Just think about that for a minute. Who was that? Was that a teacher? Was that a colleague? Was that a family member? Turn to the person next to you and share that name. How nice to hear laughter break out. Warm tones, no doubt, of friends and colleagues who you respect and admire, and maybe some of those people are right here in the room. Zul Qasimali was one of those persons for me. He tapped me on the shoulder and said, you know, have you thought about serving as co-chair of the Canadian Interfaith Conversation? So that's my role. I serve as the co-chair of the Canadian Interfaith Conversation, and we say that we advocate for religion in a pluralistic society and in Canadian public life. No doubt that word pluralistic is in there because Zul said it had to be there. We had to be advocating for pluralism. And in my tradition, Christian Reformed Christian tradition, we often speak about the importance of pluralism of two kinds. Social or structural pluralism, and a confessional or directional pluralism. So the importance in society of there being a variety of different social institutions that play an important role and take on particular responsibilities, whether that be media or labor or politics or economics or education, that flourishing of a diverse society, that social pluralism is really important. And there's also the directional or confessional piece that relates to people's deepest convictions around their faith. That too is important and needs to be acknowledged, and that both of those two things together are the antidote to totalitarianism and authoritarianism, which of course is a pretty important topic for us just these days. So I mention that because I did get a 2-page sheet of Zul's different accomplishments and leadership roles. They include being, for example, on the Premier's Roundtable on Elder Abuse, serving on the National Council of Welfare for Canada, Governor of Seneca College, Honorary Chief of the Toronto Police. I remember working closely with him on the Parliament of World Religions, and on, of course, this anniversary of the Toronto Area Interfaith Conversation, TAIC 2. And so as a last contribution here, Zul asked me if I wouldn't read a note from Father Damien McPherson, who might have been one of those people who tapped you on the shoulder too, who said, you know, have you considered interfaith work? And so Father Damien, who was at the beginning of the Toronto Area Interfaith Conversation, wrote this note, which I'm happy to read, and then let me end here. My dear friends, it is with deep personal regret and true disappointment that I'm unable to be with you on this significant 20th anniversary celebration of the Toronto Area Interfaith Council. It's with the fondest of memories that I recall the earliest beginnings of our sincere and dedicated initiatives to address common concerns to improve the quality of life for the citizens of Toronto and the surrounding area. The gift of our interfaith collaboration was and continues to be a valuable witness locally and even throughout Canada itself. Going forward, we should be very proud of one another and our noble commitment, realizing most especially that we are far from finished yet. Zul, as I commend you for the success of your leadership, I know you will agree that such success could never happen without the full and most sincere commitment of your peers. And I think when he says your peers, he means you. Thank you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Peter, very kind of you for sharing all these nice words for me. I was asking you to embrace me, not to embarrass me, but it's okay. Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, my dear colleagues. On behalf of the Toronto Area Interfaith Council, it is my honor to welcome you to Pluralism in Practice, Interfaith Frameworks for Canada's Future. My sincere thanks to the Aga Khan Museum for hosting us in this remarkable space, and to their team, along with the Toronto Area Interfaith Council's executive and council members, for helping bringing tonight's program to life. We are privileged to be joined by an outstanding panel. I would like to specially acknowledge Meredith Preston McGee, Secretary General of the Global Center for Pluralism, whose leadership continues to shape how communities around the world understand and practice pluralism. I also want to recognize my dear friend, Chief Justice Mike Toulouse, thank you, whose presence reminds us of the essential role that fairness and justice play in building inclusive societies. We are grateful to all our panelists for sharing their time and insight. Tonight is a platform to reflect on the real issues facing our city: poverty, housing, insecurity, social and economic inequities, and the growing need for understanding across lines of identity and experience. These challenges cannot be solved in isolation. They require collaboration, empathy, and a shared commitment to a common good. This is where the framework of pluralism becomes a practical tool. The work of the Global Center for Pluralism shows us that when we create systems where everyone belongs and contributes, we open the door to new solutions. And as we speak about collaboration and shared responsibility, I want to take a moment to reflect on something that often goes unseen. Across our city, hundreds of meals are prepared and served with love to the most vulnerable among us. Thousands of volunteer hours are offered every year by people from every background, individuals who do not ask who someone is, what faith they follow, or where they come from. They simply and quietly serve humanity. This spirit of selfless service is one of the clearest expressions of pluralism in action, and it reminds us of what becomes possible when compassion guides our choices. On a personal note, I draw a great inspiration from the Global Center of Pluralism approach. Their principles have shaped how I lead, how I listen, and how I bring people together. Pluralism is not simply about living side by side. Instead, it is about working side by side, co-creating a shared future where our differences strengthen us. This is also the vision of the Toronto Area Interfaith Council, which is to bring people together across faiths, cultures, and identities to address the issues that matter most. To replace division with collaboration, and to see one another as partners and neighbors in building a more compassionate city. Before we begin, I encourage you to explore museum's collections gallery and the exhibitions. As it was said earlier, as the sun appears from beyond 20 years of the Al-Bruda Award, it is a beautiful reminder of how art can illuminate shared values, spark dialogues, and bridge cultures. A fitting complement to the conversation we hope to inspire tonight. And to the young people here this evening, if you feel called to contribute, to lead, or simply to learn, Toronto Area Interfaith Council welcomes you. Your energy and ideas are essential to the work ahead. Lastly, I also want to acknowledge the many colleagues, civic leaders, and friends in this room with whom I have had the privilege of working over the years. Your support, your collaboration have shaped my journey, and I'm grateful for each one of you. And on a personal note, I want to thank my daughter Salima, whose strength and support have carried me through every chapter of my work. Thank you for being here and for your commitments to building a more inclusive and resilient city. I look forward to the discussion this evening and to the inspiration we will carry forward into our communities. And thank you and welcome. And I would ask my board members to join me on the stage. I didn't hear the applause, so I thought somebody has got arthritis and didn't want to.
Thank you, Zul, for your work and the work of your board and your team. I would also like to now call upon the Honorable Michael H. Tulloch, Chief Justice of Ontario, to say a few words.
Good evening, everyone, and I just want to thank you, Zul, for your leadership. This is an amazing endeavor. Zul and I, we go way back, over 30 years, I think, to our work together with Unity Alliance and subsequently Second Chance, the Second Chance Foundation. And I've always been inspired by your commitment to citizenship, your commitment to our society, the pluralism. You make it real for all of us. And I'm honored to be here and to be a part of this conversation this evening. It's it's quite interesting because I came in here and there's so many people that I recognize with whom I've worked and our lives intersect. And it's, you know, for me, it reinforces what makes us Canadians. And we live in a multicultural, multi-ethnic, pluralistic society. And it's people like you, each and every one of us, doing this kind of work, having these kinds of dialogues that make it real. It's good to see Councillor Carroll, and thank you for your leadership in the city, and not only in the city, but in the civic life of all of us. Your fiscal hands, it's on the city, and your leadership in policing. So I thank you for that. You know, it's a great honor to join you tonight at this very special event as we celebrate pluralism in practice and the interfaith frameworks that will shape Canada's future. I am pleased to be joined by so many distinguished leaders in public, religious, and cultural life. Let me begin by thanking the Toronto Interfaith Council and the Aga Khan Museum for bringing us together, and a special thanks again to you, Zul. As well, my warmest congratulations to the Council on its 20th anniversary. Now, two decades of sustained interfaith leadership is no small achievement. It reflects patient relationship building, steady commitment, and a real willingness to do the hard work of dialogue, not only when it is easy, but when the moment calls for it most. And we're certainly in one of those moments now. Your work at the Council captures something essential. For you, pluralism is not merely an abstract aspiration. Rather, you have lived the spirit of tonight's theme, pluralism in practice, through your concrete actions over the past 2 decades. And I would say, Zul, over 3, maybe 4 decades. Your commitment to pluralism is a daily discipline. The choice to remain in conversation when it would be easier to withdraw. The courage to listen closely across differences, and the humility to be changed, even slightly, by what we learn from one another. At its best, interfaith dialogue doesn't ask anyone to set aside what they hold sacred. It asks something more demanding, that we stand firmly in our convictions while still recognizing a shared human dignity in others and forging bonds of trust and collaboration across differences. That capacity, mutual recognition without sameness, is the foundation of belonging in a diverse society. Your commitment to strengthen pluralism matters now more than ever. While diversity is an inescapable reality, how we respond to it is anything but. Both around the world and even here in Canada, we have seen a profound erosion of public trust, rise in polarization in public discourse, an escalating hatred, intolerance, and extremism. We have learned the hard way that the impulses to demean, exclude, discriminate, disempower, and erase remain powerful. And that the choice to include, empower, and expand the circle of belonging and participation can never be taken for granted. That choice must be courageous, and deliberate. It is also fit in that this conversation is taking place here at the Aga Khan Museum, where the arts remind us that pluralism is not only about managing conflict. Here at the museum, your commitment to the arts expands imagination and empathy. You widen our moral imagination, helping us perceive and feel the lives of others in ways that purely abstract debate often cannot. You make space for for new stories and new points of connection and new ways of seeing one another. You work at this cultural institution. It brings people together. You foster curiosity, reduce defensiveness, and build a deeper sense of shared belonging. So, to the council, to you, Zul, and to your board members, thank you for your 20 years of bridge building and community service. Your work is measured not only in events and statements, but in the enduring capacity to keep people at the table, to keep listening, to keep learning, and to keep choosing dialogue over division. We've seen that and how critically important this is over the last few years. So I'm honored to be with you this evening, and I'm looking forward to the conversation with Meredith Preston McKee about how pluralism can be lived in practice and strengthened for Canada's future. Thank you.
Thank you, and he's right, he will be on our panel in just a few minutes, continuing some of the wonderful conversations and words that he just shared. Before that, though, a couple more people to speak. I'd like to call upon Mr. Vince Gasparo, Member of Parliament for Eglinton Lawrence and Parliamentary Secretary to the Secretary of State for Combating Crime.
Thank you. It is a great honor to be here with all of you. My journey in interfaith work is very new, and there are a few people here I'd like to recognize. One person, no one will be surprised to hear the name come out of my mouth, Zul. Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you so much for getting me involved. There are two other individuals here who I'd like to recognize, the global imams. Can you just please stand? I want you both to be recognized. They came to see me in Ottawa, and one of my colleagues, Leslie Church, and we had a very frank and deliberate conversation. And I want to thank you both for hosting me as well in your office for lunch. We had a very productive meeting, and I want to thank you. The fact is, I am a practicing Catholic, and the similarities we have between our faiths greatly outnumber the differences. And I believe, unfortunately, that there are those in our society, those around the world who would rather exploit our differences to their benefit. And we have to hold the line. and push back on the darkness that is trying to divide our society. And the work that you do, Zul, the work the global imams do, the work that all of you do, is paramount to pushing back on that darkness. So I want to thank all of you, and a round of applause, frankly, for all of you. Now, I have a message to deliver from someone, and I'm going to read that now. It is a great pleasure to extend my warmest greetings to everyone gathered at the Aga Khan Museum on the occasion of the 20th anniversary of the Toronto Area Interfaith Council. The unity, understanding, and dialogue that the Council has brought to Canada and our religious communities for 2 decades has been a tremendous benefit. Your work, which encompasses every major faith tradition, truly reminds us how the remarkable pluralism that so greatly defines Canada is indeed a source of incredible national enrichment. Over the years, you have built interfaith pathways that help ensure that people of all backgrounds can feel safe in their religious identity and enjoy a common sense of shared purpose. Respect across differences is the foundation of how we build strong and resilient communities in Canada, and the Toronto Area Interfaith Council continues to demonstrate incredible leadership and a profound commitment to these Canadian values. Finally, I would like to recognize my colleague, MP Vince Caspero, for joining and for his support of this important event. And to everyone here, I would like to thank you for your continued dedication to the cherished Canadian values of compassion, inclusivity, and mutual respect. Please accept my best wishes on this milestone anniversary, the Right Honourable Prime Minister Mark Carney. I'd like to call Zul up. I have the Prime Minister's remarks that were signed by him, and I have a scroll on behalf of myself and the Government of Canada thanking you for all your work. So please come up, and maybe the board can come up as well. Can I have the board come back up, please?
Next, I'd like to call upon Councillor Shelley Carroll, City Councillor for Don Valley North, City of Toronto.
Well, thank you very much. Zul put me on the spot. I wasn't planning on coming up tonight. I was just happy to be here for the discussion. But Vince, I will say this in the audience, we were saying, those are wonderful scrolls to give. I think what we all want is a signed copy of the speech the Prime Minister gave the other night. That's what we sort of a whew moment for the world. I am very happy. I feel kind of as if I'm on the spot to welcome you all to this spot in North York, this treasure. I live very close by. I represent just a little further north of where I live, so very close by. And Mr. Eaton, is he still sitting up front? Mr. Eaton, I've been in council long enough to remember the travail of getting this place in position. And it's so rewarding to me to look back years later, because that was very early in my career, and to look back years later and see that what is in a relatively short time in the life of a city, you know, a lot can happen in a city in a quarter of a century, and in a relatively short time, even shorter than that, it's just knit into the fabric of this part of the city, and no one could imagine it not being here. No one. It's something that just sort of comforts you, it calms you. As you're heading home, you have to pass it to get home for many of my residents. It just centers you. I was explaining to Vince, when you live this close by, I have a daughter with special needs, and this is where we come when she needs to calm down. And so it's always a moment of a bit of a wry smile will appear on my face if you see me coming in the door, to see people enjoying it so much when initially they couldn't imagine change happening on this spot, and what a wonderful change it was. And that's why I think it's so special to be celebrating the anniversary on this spot. It's so representative of people finally sort of dropping their opposition and deciding, okay, it's coming, now what is its potential? And that's exactly what happened over time. And so we know that humans can do that, because this is an example of that, along with everything else. Once something exists, people's minds start to turn to, what is the potential of that? What can we do here? How can it benefit people? And that happens so many times in the life of a city, in the life of a state, of a nation. And to have an interfaith council continually focusing on how can we help that along has never been more important. I want to thank Zul while I'm here. I probably am not telling the board something they don't already know. The work that Zul has done in policing in the city, but this is a very difficult time for so many officers. Zul's interaction with police at this point is with police at the minute they're walking in the door. Zul is always there at a graduation. The Kasmali family has a reward that they present to new recruits. A reward goes to the new recruit that most embodies diversity and inclusion. And diversity and inclusion did not used to be words synonymous with policing. That has been a struggle over time, such an important one. And the fact that that is something that they have to give pause and think about, and then amongst them figure out who needs to be rewarded for most embodying it in each class of 90 that goes through, is a godsend, really, if I can use that term for my faith, because we're at a point in time when we're recruiting new officers, we're sending them into one of the most difficult jobs that there is in public service. And they're somehow in a time when we are challenged by rising hate, and you are working so hard to combat against that, but they're often put in the position of having to evaluate it, adjudicate it, and decide when we've gotten so far as to have broken the laws, the hate statutes, and that's a very difficult territory. But what Zul's award does, that reward that goes out to an officer, it gives them a moment to think of, okay, that's a difficult decision, but what's my real role? My real role is to take the modern training I'm receiving, what I know about what is needed in the community, and overcome that by being part of the embracing of diversity and bringing inclusion to everything we do in the city. You start them on that journey. Every time we graduate another class, we know there's going to be that moment when they start that journey along with their career journey. And so it's a small and meaningful gesture from our honorary chief, but it also is a really important moment for officers at a really challenging time. And so I want to thank you for that. 4 classes this year, there'll be another 4 next year and the year after that, because we're a growing city, heaven knows. But I know that they get a good start, and we will, I hope, as a population, continue to support them in what is very difficult work right now. Thank you so much for giving me those minutes of the podium. Thank you.
Thank you. It's now time to continue the conversation a little more formally with our panel discussion on the topic of pluralism, interfaith dialogue, and community leadership. The panel will feature the Honorable Michael H. Tulloch, Chief Justice of Ontario, who we heard already some wonderful words from, Ms. Meredith Preston McGee, Secretary General, Global Center for Pluralism, and Dr. Sasha Priva, Director of Collections and Public Programs of the Aga Khan Museum, who will be moderating tonight's panel. Please join me in welcoming them to the stage.
Good evening. Meredith, I'll try this again.
Yeah.
Good evening. All right. Making sure you're all here. It is really absolutely wonderful to have partnered with the Toronto Area Interfaith Council and the Ismaili Council on this event. 20 years is really a tremendous achievement, and thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate this anniversary with us. We have now heard a lot about the wonderful contributions and the work of the Interfaith Council. And we understand interfaith dialogue as a true pillar of pluralism. And in this panel discussion, we'll just take a bit of a broader approach to think about the framework in which interfaith dialogue is actually situated. And for this, I'm joined by 2 truly outstanding panelists, and one could really not wish for a more distinguished panel. And I'll begin by briefly introducing both panelists before we delve into a set of questions, and then, with a look at the clock, I will probably switch to a brief Q&A period, which will then be continued over drinks and some food. Now, I'd like to begin by introducing Chief Justice Tulloch, who was appointed Chief Justice of Ontario and President of the Court of Appeal for Ontario on December 15, 2022. Prior to his appointment as Chief Justice, Justice Tulloch served 19 years as a judge. First, 9 years as a trial judge on the Superior Court of Justice, where he was first appointed in September 2003, and then he served 10 years as an appellate judge on the Court of Appeal for Ontario, to which he was elevated in June 2012. In 2016, Chief Justice Tulloch was appointed by the Ontario government to conduct important reviews which resulted in 2 extensive reports. In 2017, the report of the Independent Police Oversight Review, and a year later, the report of the Independent Street Checks Review. Please join us all once again in welcoming Chief Justice Tulloch. Our second panelist is Meredith Preston McGee, who is the Secretary General of the Global Center for Pluralism in Ottawa. She leads the center's work to build understanding and action for pluralism in societies around the world, and we'll hear quite a bit about that in a moment. She's a peacemaker by background. She served as the Africa Regional Director with the Center for Humanitarian Dialogue, including as an advisor to Kofi Annan during the Kenya National Dialogue and Reconciliation, and she helped establish and facilitate peace processes in Nigeria, Somalia, Sudan, and South Sudan, and elsewhere, and this work continues today. She contributes to policy discussion and teaches on peacemaking globally. Meredith began her career working with the Naga in Northeast India and ethnic minorities in Myanmar. Please join me in welcoming Meredith Preston McGee. And Meredith, let's start with you. I mean, we've heard the term pluralism used quite extensively already tonight, but let's actually, go back to the drawing board for a moment. And since you are the authority on pluralism in the room, and let's hear from you as how you would define the term and what you see as the most common misconception about it in public discourse today.
Sasha, thank you. And again, thank you so much for everyone to being here tonight. I have to say, I feel like this is a bit of a master's level crowd when it comes to pluralism. And so often I will start by saying things like, diversity is a fact. We are all diverse in this room. So we're not talking about the facts of our society. We're talking about the choices and actions that we take. We're talking about acknowledging the strength in our diversity and how that actually takes us forward. It really is about the choices that we make. So we know that. But I would say that there's a couple of other pieces that I think are important that speak a bit to some of the misconceptions. And one of the first ones is that pluralism doesn't happen automatically. His late Highness, the Aga Khan, said, pluralist societies are not accidents of history. They require deliberate choices. And I think that that's a really critical piece of this. But equally, pluralism is about genuinely transforming systems. It isn't simply including a few additional people into the mainstream. It requires us to engage with our identities at a deeper level. It requires us to connect with one another at a deeper level in order to co-create the kinds of societies that we want to live in. But I think importantly as well, that raises a huge number of tensions. And I think one of the misconceptions is that pluralism is about this utopia where we're all just going to get along. And we know that pluralism isn't easy. It does bring up tensions and uncomfortable conversations, and we need to lean in to that. So when we think about this utopian space that so often gets misunderstood with pluralism, we like to think about this as actually a set of tools of how you can lean into those tensions of our differences constructively, how we can engage with one another, really with the core goal, and I think this doesn't get spoken about enough, although it's been raised many, many times already tonight, of belonging, and belonging in relationship to one another. That I don't belong at the expense of you, and vice versa, that we can only belong in fellowship, quite frankly, with one another, and that's really central to a pluralist understanding.
Thank you very much. I think this sets up really well. And now turning to you, Chief Justice, and we've heard a little bit about this in your speech already, your long-standing commitment to community engagement, and let me draw you out on this a little bit more. How has your approach to leadership evolved through your work with diverse communities across Ontario?
Okay, so for me, I almost grew up working within community organizations from I was a student, an undergraduate student. I was lucky enough to have met one of the founders of the Urban Alliance on Race Relations when I was a student at York University back in the 80s. Then Dr. Wilson Head, who along with Rabbi Gunter Plow formulated the Urban Alliance. And from there, I was able to learn under their feet, so to speak, what living in a pluralistic society was all about. And like Meredith has said, accepting the differences and recognizing that differences between communities, between faith, can be a society's strength, and embracing each other, notwithstanding our differences. And someone said earlier that I think it was Vince that said this, an interfaith council such as this is evidence of the fact that while we may have different we may come from different religious backgrounds, different identities. The reality is our commonalities are greater than our differences. And so it's all about finding common ground. And so fast forward, I went into law, and in law I recognize that we live in a society where conflict will always be constant. And that is one of the reasons why, we have a legal system to resolve conflicts. That is why we have judges and we have institutions such as courts. And so for me, working within a collaborative type environment and recognizing that there are value to people that bring differences to our table, it strengthens us as a society. So how has my background evolved? Well, it has evolved in that I now, from the way I started, recognizing the importance of people and the differences and the fact that we live in a multicultural, multi-ethnic society, and the vision of the Charter of Rights is for us to have a just society, and that just society can only come about with us validating and recognizing and embracing each other's, and not only our commonalities, but also our differences. And so it allows me to work collaboratively with others. And I think that is how I met Zul initially. I started a foundation called Second Chance when I was a lawyer. And it evolved for years, over the last 30 years. And individuals such as Zul became a leader within our organization. And so recognizing that it's citizens, it's people in different communities who are engaged in different endeavors and doing different things that will build this just society that we all want and that the founders of our Constitution envision. So it's about collaborative, courageous leadership and keeping people at the center of all that we do.
Thank you. And pluralism, of course, hard work. And it is local work as much as it is global work. And really that's where your work at the Global Center for Pluralism comes in. And I'd like to dive a little bit into what the center does in terms of could you talk a little bit about recent initiatives and projects that best illustrate how pluralism can practically implement it in divided and diverse societies, a phenomenon that we have to grapple more and more with today.
Absolutely. And Sasha, when I looked at this question, I thought, well, that's impossible, because pluralism expresses itself differently in every society, and it expresses itself in myriad ways in every society. The work of the Interfaith Council is exactly that. This is pluralism in practice and in action. But I thought I'd give an example that's illustrative rather than the best, because there isn't a single pluralist society we can just point to and say, that's how it works. We have to seek inspiration and creativity from all of the different practices that we see around us. But one framing that I think is quite helpful is that when we look at pluralism in a society, we think about two big pillars. And one is our laws, our policies, our systems of governance, the way we sort of structure the scaffolding of our society. What laws do we allow to open space for inclusive citizenship? What does that look like? What are we saying as a society when we do that? But that is only one pillar of this, because our social norms and our narratives sit next to that, and they shape our laws and our policies, and those evolve over time. And our laws and our policies shape our social and cultural responses to pluralism. So these two things sit next to each other, and they can work collectively towards a more pluralistic society, or they can move us away, as we're seeing in many places. And so I'd turn to Kenya, to an example that I think is really excellent following the Kenya National Dialogue and Reconciliation process that I worked on with His Excellency Kofi Annan. A new constitution came into being, and it was a more inclusive constitution and enshrined the rights of citizenship across ethnicities, across faiths, much more clearly in the Kenyan constitution. But still, there are thousands of Kenyans that cannot access citizenship. They try to access their citizenship documents, they go through all of the processes, they don't receive their documents. Imagine living life without a national ID. You can't get a job, can't do a background check, you don't have a driver's license, you don't have a birth certificate, you can't get your kids into school. And so it's pushing particular communities to the margins of society. So one of the processes there that I think is particularly powerful is a group called Namati Kenya, and they develop paralegals who train citizens and communities, first of all, to know their rights, to know the law, and to use that to advocate for themselves, and then to work with community leaders, and particularly with faith leaders in those communities, to shape the law, to use the law, and to shape the law, to change that, to make reforms. One of the things they had, for example, was community boards that had to vet people before they could get national IDs. Goes against the Constitution, and they managed to get that overturned through these sorts of processes, through communities, through faith leaders, working to build a more pluralist society, to remind Kenyans that all of these individuals are Kenyan. Because when you don't have a national ID, it again feeds into a narrative, well, maybe he's not really a Kenyan. That Muslim from the coast, is he really a Kenyan? Once everyone has access to national identity documents, they're able to be full citizens. It's the society saying, you belong, you are with us. So I think that's one example of many, and I could quite honestly tell you stories like that all night, but just to give a reflection of what it takes for leaders in the community, civic leaders, faith leaders, legal scholars, legal activists coming together to build a more pluralistic space.
Thank you. That's indeed a very powerful example. And earlier today we had the generous gift of your time and insight with museum staff to discuss pluralism. And we also, in that context, we looked at the Global Pluralism Monitor, and I was pleased to see culture, and in that case also the museums involved in this work. You know, it's very much what we do here as a museum, but also how you actually look at indicators. And a key indicator, of course, is, as you mentioned earlier, is the structures, the legal structures as well, the judiciary that informs that work. And Justice Tulloch, in what ways do you see the principles of pluralism informing the role of the judiciary and the justice system more broadly? You might find yourself in one of Meredith's indicators.
Well, I mean, the reality is for us, working within the justice system, is that pluralism is the very reason why courts exist. Because we live in a society with deep differences, like I said earlier, and we need fair institutions to resolve disputes peacefully. For the judiciary, pluralism is expressed through practical commitments rather than abstract ideals. First, pluralism requires equal dignity and equal access, meaning everyone is entitled to be heard and to be treated with respect, regardless of background. We must be intentional in ensuring that our court system remains an inclusive sanctuary where people can freely, respectfully, and productively exchange conflicting points of views. By necessity, a court hearing is an adversarial process. So second, pluralism depends on independence and impartiality, because people need to believe outcomes are determined by law and evidence and not by identity or influence. So an unwavering commitment to fairness, it enriches a diverse public's confidence in their courts. And that's why, for us, a court must reflect the society that it's serving, or else there will be a conflict, there will be a, there will be a crisis of confidence. Third, pluralism requires reasons and transparency, because legitimacy depends on explaining decisions in a way that people can understand, even when they disagree with the result. Often, people just want to be heard, and they want to have a sense that when they present their cases, they come away feeling that this judge, whether they disagree with me, whether I agree with the outcome, I was heard, right, and understood. So pluralism, it encouraged our system and our laws to reflect the people that we serve. By enhancing diversity on the bench and bar, we remain relevant to our diverse society and earn its confidence. So our laws, too, must reflect our society's diverse traditions. And this commitment is woven into the very fabric of our justice system. From our respect for Quebec's distinct French legal tradition, to our Constitution's guarantee of Indigenous rights, to our Charter's pledge to guarantee every individual the equal protection and equal benefit of the law. Now, fifth, pluralism also presses the justice system to be genuinely accessible and understandable, because if ordinary people experience the system as intimidating or incomprehensible, then confidence and belonging erodes. And so for me, being Chief Justice, I foster an inclusive court system, a court system where people feel that it belongs to them, each of us. It doesn't matter what your station in life is. You should feel that this institution is your own. And that's the only way we can build public confidence. Pluralism does not mean courts decide cases by popularity or by compromise between groups. It means that we perform our role fairly, consistently, and with respect for the dignity of everyone before the system. Bridge to Meredith, your work underscores something important here. Pluralism, it has to be designed into institutions so it can be lived in practice. So I thank you for the work that you do, and it informs my approach to the way that I see the justice system as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And if I may stay with you, and Meredith, we get back to you in a moment, because what you've just illustrated begs of public trust in justice institutions. So that's why I would like to stick with you for a moment to really, as you said, this trust in institution depends on how effectively these institutions reflect and respond to the lived experience of the diverse population. And I'd like to hear from you how your own leadership has shaped your thinking about fostering trust and inclusion in the legal system.
Right. So for me, my entire adult life as a professional has been working within the court system, starting out as a Crown prosecutor and then as a defense lawyer at a very young age, and as you've heard now, as a judge for the last 23 years. And what I learned over those years is the importance of being connected to the community that you serve. And the community, I mean it in a broad sense. Community work, it makes clear that trust is often earned at the point of contact, not through institutional mission statements or high-level commitments. So it doesn't matter what we say. It doesn't matter what the mission statement is or what we write. It's how we interact with others and make them feel, right, that really instill confidence in our systems. Now, a part of the work that I did, and I worked very closely with Shelley on two very important policing projects that I was asked to do by the Ontario government, where I led 2 independent reviews on policing in Ontario. And through both reviews, I met with thousands of people across Ontario, not only in our major cities, but also in rural, northern, and Indigenous communities. And these encounters taught me that for most people, the justice system is experienced through everyday interactions. whether they're treated with respect and dignity, or whether information is explained clearly, and whether processes are navigatable and accessible. So I see the police officers in the room. I mean, some people, their only interaction with the justice system will be through your regular day-to-day interactions with them. And how they feel from that interaction will determine their level of confidence in not only the policing profession, but in our entire system. I've learned that fairness has to be felt as well as delivered, and that respectable and respectful processes is part of our legitimacy, not an optional extra. So trust also depends on acknowledging barriers that shape lived experience, including language, cost, geography, culture, and the weight of history for communities that have had difficult experiences with public institutions. One of the realities also, I think, that of a pluralistic, multi-ethnic, multicultural society is the fact that a lot of us are immigrants, and some of us, we come from countries where there is a lack of trust in authoritative institutions and governments. And sometimes those feelings of distrust, we carry that with us, right? Because I would say, sometimes intragenerational trauma as a result of our interactions with authoritative figures that have been oppressive on us. And so when we're building a pluralistic society that is accessible and that is not only embracing but also engaging to our people, where we want to instill trust, we have to be mindful of people's individual historic experiences as well. Inclusion in the justice system is therefore operational and practical. It shows up in communication, accessibility, courtroom culture, and whether people feel the institution takes them seriously. And you know what, what I can tell you also is this. Being a part of the system for over 20 years, I came up in a system where I didn't feel initially very, very welcoming in our systems. And so, you know, as a young black lawyer in trying cases in the courts, be it as a Crown prosecutor or when I left and became a defense lawyer, there were challenges at times with people who didn't see me in that role, right, and couldn't accept that reality. And I knew how I felt. I felt a sense of alienation and distrust from these institutions that are supposed to be there for us. And so that informs the way I view the system and how I lead the justice system now. So building trust takes time and consistency, and it requires humility, especially the willingness to hear hard truths and improve how the system actually functions for the people who relies on it. So without listening to the diverse people we serve, we risk becoming cloistered off in our own intellectual world, separated from the society that we're meant to serve. And as a lawyer, I can tell you that, you know, I'm sure you've all heard of legalisms, right? And, you know, I grew up in a time where reading and writing the law was very, very complex. So you make it as obscure as possible, and it was just there for the lawyers and the judges. And I think that what that created was, you know, almost an obstruction from the ordinary people actually understanding what our laws is about and what the judgments are supposed to be conveying. And it makes it, you know, distant and abstract, not applicable and connected to the people. And so for me, it's really important for the work that we do to be understood and to be relatable to the people that are, members of our society. So building trust, it takes time and consistency, and it requires humility, like I said. And that's where culture and dialogue matter too, because law can set the shared rules, but empathy helps us live within them. So.
Can I just,
I was about to ask you if you want to
before you
comment on
ask
the
my
question
question,
of trust.
I actually, because you've raised so many interesting points, and I was with former Constitutional Justice Albie Sachs of South Africa recently in Ottawa. He was here on a visit, and one of the things he said is, judgments have to be stories that our ordinary citizenry can read and understand that this is something that is shaping their society. And if they can't read it as a story that they can access, then we as the Constitutional Court haven't done our job. And he has, and I would commend all of you to look at it, they've done a phenomenal online compendium of his work and his judgments in conversation with him to tell those stories exactly. But another story of accessibility, which I think is so central to trust and to belonging, one of our Global Pluralism Award winners from 2 years ago is an indigenous youth collective from Mexico, from Oaxaca, called Red de Intérpretes. And they work inside the justice system. Oaxaca is the most, I think I'm getting this right, the most linguistically diverse place on the planet. So if you say, we want an accessible system, you can't in fact have your judgments rendered into 400 languages. But you can work with youth collectives like this who work as interpreters, not just for language inside the system, but for indigenous worldviews. And they train justices, they train court workers, and then they work with indigenous folks who are in contact with the law. And they create that bridge and that barrier so that you can create that kind of accessibility in real time and practicality in a space like that. And so again, it's also the partnership with civic actors. But the last thing that really spurred from what you were saying is that belonging is not just about how much I feel Canadian or you feel Canadian, or even how much I see you as a Canadian or you see me. It's about our ability to have agency in how we shape our society. And belonging doesn't work if you don't feel like you have some sort of agency to do something and to shape the space around you. And so similarly, if people don't feel like they can understand and access the law, then they don't feel like they can shape and have a hand in it.
Excellent. So I'm going to go off script here.
You've lost us, Sasha,
so
sorry.
it's amazing that you brought up Albie Sachs, right? Because he is also one of my heroes. And interestingly enough, when I was a student at York University, as a law student at Osgoode Hall, three of us, we formed an organization called the Nelson Mandela Law Society. And that was before Nelson Mandela before he was released from prison. So he was still in jail. And we were able to bring, through our dean, who happens to be one of my former colleagues on the Court of Appeal, who was a dean at the law school at the time, Jim McPherson. We were able to, they gave us money, and the school supported us. A very small group of us. We started out as 3 students, and then we collaborated with other students throughout the province and the country to support the education on the anti-apartheid regime. And through us, we were able to bring Albie Sachs to York for the first time. I think that was his first visit. And we brought him there before his accident when he lost his eye and his arm, right? And then he came back again after that. But interestingly enough, it was Canada's constitutional system that they modeled, and they came here and studied to create the Constitutional Court of South Africa. And significantly, that was one of the reasons why Nelson Mandela, his first visit outside of South Africa when he was released from prison and became president of South Africa. It was to here, to Toronto. And I think the school that he went to was Ryerson University that gave him what was then Ryerson, now TMU, that gave him an honorary degree. And it was the students, my group of students, who asked me about the history of community involvement. It started back then, still connected. And I was able to see Albie Sachs in the summer when he came here, and we celebrated the 150th year anniversary of the Supreme Court of Canada. And I happened to have a dialogue with him there. And it's quite interesting because, you know, you're absolutely right. Our judgments, it has to be like a story, or else it's totally abstract and irrelevant from the people that we're trying to get to actually connect with the law, so that they can understand it and so that the law can be applicable to them. So I just wanted to add that piece.
Great, thank you. And I'd like to bring us to the question on both of you, to the question of interfaith dialogue. I think both of you have set the grounds really well for us now to pivot to this question that brought us here together tonight. And I'd like to talk a little bit more about how institutions can support bridging communities across religious lines. And would like to kick us off?
Sure. I mean, I'll say a couple of quick sort of framing things. You mentioned the Global Pluralism Monitor, which is a sort of a tool that we use to essentially look at the building blocks of pluralism in a society. And one of the core pillars of that is how leaders in society are engaging with diversity, what examples they're setting, how they're building bridges, how they're managing those spaces. And of course, religious leaders are really sort of central, obviously, to that pillar. But what I have seen that I think really stands apart with faith leaders, I think there's maybe two things. And the first goes back to what you were mentioning about trust, that we are in a trust crisis with our institutions, despite all the extraordinary work you're doing, Mr. Chief Justice. But we are in a crisis of trust, and people are more isolated than they have been in a very, very long time. But one of the places and spaces that people come to is their places of faith. And their places of faith are places of community. And so that is an opportunity to reach people when they're with their own faith community and then help them to reach out to others. So there's, I think, a really important opportunity for that right now. The second thing I find with sort of opposition sometimes to pluralism is an idea that, well, I have my identity, and if I want to engage with difference, it's going to require that I shed some of my principles, that I give up my identity in order to engage with someone who is different from me. And what I think is so important about interfaith dialogue is recognizing that that's not, in fact, what we're asking, and that faith is sacred. It is a sacred piece of your identity, but it's not the only piece of your identity. And I think it was Bishop Tutu who would say that we could be diverse in our religions but united in our humanity, that there is this undercurrent that sits underneath. And so faith leaders being able to pull people to that space of that common humanity is incredibly powerful. And I think incredibly powerful in this moment. I know we all heard Prime Minister Carney's speech in Davos, of course. And we heard him say there something he said in several places, which is one of Canada's strengths is that we are a pluralist society that works. And that matters, but that doesn't just happen. We have to keep working at it. And we need to find the ways that we're weaving this together when we are isolated, when we are feeling divided. And so faith leaders coming together and setting that example, but also bringing their communities, bringing their community spaces into an interfaith space, bringing their communions to other places to demonstrate that really starts to set that stage in an elemental way, which is something I think we need in Canada now more than ever.
Would you like to comment on the question of interfaith dialogue as well?
Yeah, so I strongly believe that, faith communities are what knit together neighborhoods and societies, right? And, you know, it's what instill within children values, it creates cohesiveness in families. And it's critically important that we respect and recognize, you know, the value and the importance of faith, regardless of what our religious lean-ins may be. And I think, so that's the commonality, I think, of all faiths, regardless of their religious affiliations and or disciplines. And so once we come to that understanding, then we then recognize that there is a value to each individual person's religious tradition and their faith, whether we believe in them or not. But that is what keeps and builds our communities. And it's through our ability to interact with each other, respecting our differences of opinions, right? And interestingly enough, history has said, has informed us that religion can be very divisive. It creates all sorts of, I guess, wars, but also respect for each other's individual discipline and religious belief. It also brings people together, and it creates strength. And I think it's a matter of understanding and recognizing that as a society that will enhance us as a country. And it's what I think that Carney was, or the Prime Minister was talking about, right? That we're actually an experiment that is working in a very positive way. And it wasn't always like this, I should say, right? As a child growing up in this city, you tend to, well, I wasn't very comfortable talking about my faith because some people may not have agreed with my personal beliefs, but thank goodness, because of, you know, an acceptance over the years of other people's faith and the freedom, the entrenched, constitutional, entrenched freedom of religion, right? That's, just so that you know, that's a constitutional right to practice your own religious beliefs. And I think that's a good thing, because what that has enabled us to do as a society is to respect each other's differences and to still coexist and live and work and build together so that we can have a more cohesive and egalitarian society.
And of course, this happens at different paces for everybody. You know, in the words of my Peloton instructor, progression, not perfection.
Right.
Right. I'd like to jump to a final question before we briefly open it up to the floor. And given that we're an art museum here, and Meredith, you spoke about the institutions that we turn to, I'd like to think and hope that museums are among those institutions, and that's in fact what I get up for every day, for this institution to become one of those places. And I would be grateful if both of you could offer final reflections on the role of art and culture in contributing the work of building pluralistic societies and indeed also interfaith dialogue.
Yeah, you start.
I think there's something also as we puzzle through who we are. You know, one of the other things that pluralism reminds us is that we are all many, many things. As Walt Whitman said, which I love this quote, he said, "Do I contradict myself? Very well then, I contradict myself. I am large and I contain multitudes." We are many things. And one of the wonderful things about art is that it holds up a mirror to a bit of us that maybe we had forgotten about or we didn't know that we had. It pushes our boundaries about how we understand how other people may see the world or experience things. And it takes us into worlds to see things and frame things in new ways. And I think, again, just to my earlier points about interfaith dialogue, I think cultural institutions similarly help pull us into those spaces. Literature does that. You read a novel and you're inside the lives of people whose lives you would never be inside. I know so many Canadians who are forever changed by reading Five Little Indians by Michelle Good, because it was a way to get inside an understanding of the generational legacies of trauma of residential schools that otherwise you couldn't exist. So art can do that in a way that a public lecture can't do. But art institutions are equally spaces of gathering like this, where people can come together and have those experiences with somebody that they didn't expect to meet. And that, again, like faith communities right now, I think is elemental for pluralism in Canada.
Yeah, so 100% agree. I think that for me, books and art was my liberation, I should say, right? Because as a child growing up, even to become a lawyer, even to become a judge, if I didn't see it around me in my own family, then I could never have possibly, outside of art, outside of the world of books, imagine my own capacity to enter into this world. I think art is something that is universal. The appreciation of art, it transcends culture. It transcends, worlds. And it's critically, in my view, important to us as a society for unifying our commonalities, right? And so it widens our moral imagination, helping us to see and understand the lives of others and making real dialogue across our differences more possible. And so it's, an institution such as this, a museum such as this, it only enhances us as a community, as a society, and it enables us to then connect with each other, regardless of our backgrounds, in a way that we all feel that we are one and the same. And that's what I think art and culture is able to do.
Thank you so much. Now over to you. I think we have time for two very succinct questions. There's microphones at the front, so if any would like to come up, yeah, please. Maybe is there? Okay. Yeah, please.
Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your insights, and your stories as well. So my name is Audrey. I work at the Mary Ward Center, which is a ministry of the Loretto Sisters. Part of our work is youth engagement. And so when I'm hearing what you're talking about, the importance of narratives with youth and social media, some of those narratives and having it as an echo chamber, some of those narratives are sometimes polarizing and tend to lead away from dialogue. So I was wondering, with the work in your respective capacities that you do, or even outside of your work with other organizations, what are some of the strategies or stories that they're sharing to promote more dialogue versus that polarization?
Thank you. And take the second question as well, and please. It's a great acoustic here, but the yelling might not transmit as much as. Well, if you stand here, please come to the front.
Thank you, Your Honor, and the Toronto Area Interfaith Council for organizing this wonderful event tonight. All of the great members of the community are doing a great job. However, we see a lot of challenges in our society, especially when we are dealing with the youth. So I would request, can we drill down at the youth level at schools to promote the interfaith harmony and dialogues at school levels?
Thank you for this question. Two questions about youth.
Yeah. Okay, so for me, I think it's critically important for us to connect with our youths and to connect with them in a real way. I think that the curriculum of the schools need to focus on civic education in a real sense. And I think that should be from the earliest stages, right? So that kids can understand and appreciate some of these values that stabilizes us as a community and as a society. Fail in which, then they will become addicted and become, essentially the byproduct of social media and algorithms and echo chambers. And unfortunately, my view is that we will lose them as engaged citizens. So we have to take responsibility for our children. And this is where I think an interfaith community such as this is critically important, because, be it in your temples or in your churches or wherever you have your sacred teachings and faith engagements, you have families there. And I think you have to somehow try to ensure that the teachings are also relevant and connected to children as they grow up in these faith communities, so that we as a society don't lose them to social media that can be devastating. So that's a big part of it. For me, as a Chief Justice, I think that I've made it a priority for us to engage in public education, focusing on civic education and the importance of institutions such as the courts, but not exclusively. Also important of, institutions such as your religious organizations that are entrenched within our constitutions, so that they have value to the society that we're not only living in, but we're advancing and promoting.
Final word.
I'll speak specifically to social media, and as a parent, like, my God, we have to get our kids off these things, right? So there's that. So I think there is a pull factor back to get kids into congregations and into community events and into engagements where they're having human interactions. Kids need human childhoods. As Jonathan Haidt has said many times, kids need human childhoods. That said, there is some really good work being done about how you create online spaces that are deliberative, that are thoughtful, that are surfacing commonalities when people are saying a range of different things. And Build Up, who are one of our Global Pluralism Award laureates, does an enormous amount of this kind of work around the world. They're coming to Canada. They're convening their Build Peace conference here at Waterloo in November. And they look at how you can create spaces where people engage online. And then when they've put something out, it comes back to them connected to things that other people have said, and it asks you to reflect and say, you thought this is how the rest of the community saw that. What do you think about how they saw it? And you sort of start to force a bit of deliberation into these spaces. And while I do think that TikTok and a lot of these reels are still dominating, this is definitely a challenge. The other thing that I see that does give me some hope is that young people are tired of doom scrolling also, and are engaging more in their own collective spaces online. And maybe they spend more time online than all of us in this room, if I'm being generational to all of you, do. But they're finding ways of curating these spaces, and there's some interesting innovations that are coming out to make those spaces deliberative and thoughtful and pluralist.
Thank you very much. Great final words. And with that, please join me in thanking our panelists for an absolutely rich and wonderful discussion. Thank you so much. It was absolutely brilliant. Faisal, take us into the third act.
We should thank Dr. Sasha Priver as well for his moderation of the panel, so please let's give him a round of applause. Okay. At this point, I'd like to call up John Vorpostel and Vivian Kwok from the World Interfaith Harmony Week Toronto Steering Committee to present a special award.
Bright lights. But I see everybody. That's a good thing. Our World Interfaith Harmony Week Toronto Steering Committee recognizes that the success that we've had as an organization in promoting this week in the GTA is very much a reflection of the fertile ground that we find here in Toronto. World Interfaith Harmony Week was first proposed by the United Nations General Assembly in September of 2010, and then unanimously passed in October. And since 2013, February 2013, we've been celebrating this week in Toronto. One of the very first people that we approached was Father Damien McPherson, who became one of our founding committee members. Toronto Area Interfaith Council has been tilling this fertile ground for quite some time, much longer than we have. The other organizations are Mosaic, that have been working here for a long time. It's been quite a bit of good fertile ground for us to operate in. In 2020, we founded something called the Interfaith Champion Awards. In 2026, this coming February, we'll be honoring Dr. Helene Ijaz, who I believe many of you must know. Last February, we were very honored to present this to Toronto Area Interfaith Council. We had to do it virtually. Now tonight, we get to do it in person. So we would like to call up Zul, please, to come and accept this on behalf of Toronto Area Interfaith Council, and perhaps you want to bring the rest of the board along with you. Yes, so congratulations, Toronto Area Interfaith Council, and many more years.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ignore that. Actually, don't, because that's next. Never have there been a more indicative event and truer words to follow than the ones we've heard today about the state of the world we're in and what we should be following. And if all else fails, we all know what to follow. It's the golden rule. And today we're joined by faith leaders from across the city and across our communities to share that golden rule with us. So if I can invite them all to come on stage. I think you guys know who you are, and I believe Mr. Chandrakana will lead us through the next activity.
Namaste. I bow to the divinity and everyone in this room. The golden rule, please. Those who are going to be presenting the golden rule or reciting, please come to the stage. This golden rule is a matter of pride and joy for us in Canada. It was designed by Paul McKenna, who could not be here this evening, at the Scarborough Mission got it printed, and it is displayed in schoolhouses in 35 countries, including the hallways of the United Nations. It's very succinct. Please come. Please come. Time is of the essence. It is very succinct. Quite often, a statement is made, Imam Ali? Oh, there. Quite often the statement is made that it's too brief, but sometimes time has to be brief. More words could be added. So we have these panel of 7 reciters who will recite precisely that lines from what you see at there of the golden rule, and then they'll place the roses on behalf of all of us. Thank you. Oh, I was one more thing. I think we do have another 2-3 minutes. Normally it starts with a universal prayer, and we don't have that option, but I will simply go one step. In the Eastern philosophical traditions, our existence is affected by 3 spheres. What happens in the cosmos, outer space, the solar system, the planet, and us. So very briefly, the invocation is, may there be peace in the universe as a whole, the cosmos. The galaxies shifting, hurtling into each other, the flares in the solar system from the sun, the meteorites, the asteroids, may there be peace in them. On this planet, may the waters be cool, may the herbs be nutritious, be peace in the herbs and the vegetation that we consume, and finally, may there be peace amongst us and within our monkey minds. And I invite the first panelist.
Buddhism. Treat not others in ways that you yourself would find hurtful.
I'd like to recite from the Guru Granth Sahib, page 1299, and it says, "Na koi beri, nahi begana," which translated would mean that I am a stranger to no one, no one's a stranger to me. I'm a friend to all.
In everything, do to others as you would have them do to you, for this is the law and the prophets. Jesus in the Gospel of St. Matthew, chapter 7, verse 12.
My name is Mabad Duster, representing the Zoroastrian community over here in Toronto. The rule that I'd like to say is, happiness is to the one who gives happiness to others. This is from the hymns of our prophet Zarathustra, from the Ashtavaiti Gatha, chapter 43, verse 1. Thank you.
My name is Leonard Swartz from the Jewish Connections Regent Park Association. Hillel, the famous Jewish rabbi and scholar who was active about 2,050 years ago, famously said that he could teach the whole Torah to someone while they stood on one foot. Whatever is hateful to you, thou shalt not do to your neighbor. The rest is interpretation. Go and learn it. Thank you.
Imam Imran Ali of the Canadian Council of Imams. I read the Golden Rule for the faith of Islam, a saying of the final prophet to humanity, Muhammad, peace be upon him. لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. No one should profess belief until they wish and love for others that which they love for themselves.
On Hinduism, this is the sum of duty. Do not do to others what others would cause pain. What would cause pain if done to you? This is the sum of duty. Do not do to others what would cause pain if done to you. He who constantly sees all beings in his own true self and his own true self in all beings, living and non-living, will neither feel nor can he feel ill will towards anyone or anything. Om Shanti.
Thank you all for that very lovely and touching ceremony. Okay, I'd like to call Zol back on along with members of his board for another special quick presentation. We'd also like to call our three panelists back to the stage as well. So the Honorable Michael H. Tulloch, Chief Justice of Ontario, Ms. Meredith Preston McGee, the Secretary General, Global Center for Pluralism, and Dr. Sasha Priver, the Director of Collections and Public Programs at the Aga Khan Museum. I don't think you have to speak anymore. I think this is good. I think you're good. I think you're good. Don't look, don't look. So on behalf of the Toronto Interfaith Council, I believe there's a token of appreciation for all our panelists for their lovely work and conversation today. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And now we'd like to welcome the entire board for a photo opportunity, please. Big smiles. Thank you all again for the work you continue to do in arranging this wonderful conversation and dialogue that will clearly be on the minds of everyone after today. So thank you guys again for all the work, and the panelists for your conversation. At this point, for closing remarks, I'd like to call upon the president of the Ismaili Council for Toronto, Ms. Namira Dalwani, to share a few words. Eventually. Sorry. One more time, Ms. Namira Dalwani, President of the Ismaili Council for Toronto.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Esteemed panelists, distinguished guests, and friends of the Toronto Area Interfaith Council, good evening. Before I start my speech, I have to say there's one sentence that's just ringing in my head. We are a diverse, plural society, and yet the Golden Rule tells us that we are united, we are one. And if that's one thing that we leave with today, this is something that's going to unite us and bring this message out to the world in these turbulent times. As we bring this program to a close, I'm struck by the wide range of voices we have heard tonight. The reflections shared tonight by our civic leaders and panelists Justice Jeff Tulloch and Meredith Preston McGee remind us that pluralism isn't a given. It is a goal. A goal we must pursue with intention and purpose. Chief Justice and Meredith, thank you for a discussion that was both inspiring and practical. You showed us that trust is earned not only through dialogue, but it's at the point of contact. It's at the point where an individual leaves feeling something different. You told us that faith is a sacred piece of your identity, but not the only piece. And how do you bring that as a unity or unifying factor as you move forward? You've shown us that honest conversation and leaning into difficult conversations about pluralism is the most effective tool we have for turning our shared values into meaningful action and a better future for all. A special thank you to Meredith Preston McGee. Your leadership is a vital part of the Aga Khan Development Network's mission, and it reminds us that our local efforts here in Toronto are connected to a much larger global movement to foster more inclusive societies. By celebrating the Toronto Area Interfaith Council's 20th anniversary here at the beautiful Aga Khan Museum, we are recognizing that when we work together across different backgrounds, we set an example for others to follow. Let's continue the dialogue and let's lean into some of these difficult conversations. Congratulations to the Toronto Area Interfaith Council on your 2 decades of service and your award tonight. You have shown us that when we work as partners, we build something that truly lasts. Thank you all for your presence, your commitment, and your partnership. And last but not least, a very big thank you to Ulrike and Sasha and Chris from the museum, to the staff and volunteers that have been coming together to make this event a reality, and to everyone else that is constantly serving to bring people together and to make the Toronto Area Interfaith Council's vision a reality. Thank you very much and have a good evening.
Thank you to all the speakers and to everybody in attendance today. There's no more fitting setting to have had these conversations, and again, I hope they continue beyond just from in this room to out there to beyond this building as well. Again, you can continue that conversation with the reception in the atrium. We do urge you again to visit the museum's exhibitions and galleries, especially the current special exhibition, As the Sun Appears from Beyond, which is closing in just a few weeks. So I hope everyone enjoyed their time today. It was a pleasure to be here. It was a pleasure to MC for you today, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.